Welcome back to TTC. One genre of lights you haven't tried yet is EDC wedge lights, like the Olight Arkfeld. Wait, hold up. Really, enough people are making lights like the Streamlight Wedge now that it's a whole new EDC category? Well, I guess it is. And they're all 1,000 plus lumens too somehow. So we're gonna buy what look to be some of the best sellers, then test their mighty lumen claims for some lights that really, to me, look penlight in size to see how they handle those lumens over their runtime, then drop test them until an overall winner can be crowned. Not because we take any enjoyment out of this, it's just science. And we got to start with that wedge light, the Streamlight Wedge, an angular pencil-like light with a molded aluminum grip that appears to have set a trend. It's hard to step into a shop these days and not see one mechanic with one. This is the model AAA11 here that we bought for about 90 bucks. One characteristic of this category of lights, it seems, is that they all cost quite a bit for this small of a light, but they bring some specs as well. This 300 lumen light also easily toggles forward for 1000 lumens, which springs back to 300 lumen when released. But makes sense for this kind of light, I think, small, inspection-like. It's not a stationary work light. And it does seem bright, and that lever switch feels nice and intuitive. The finger grooves are even sort of nice, and it charges with USB-C, like every light today, hallelujah. Though it charges at what we found to be 0.4 amps, never getting up to 0.5, which is pretty typical of a pen light, but you'd be expecting maybe a little bit more for a $90 to $100 light. Guys were paying $120 typically when these things came out. And that USB-C is not covered, though they do say is waterproof. Metal chips and dust might not be as friendly long-term to this type of port, but it is very easy to access. And it feels solid, a bit of a little unit, this one, but does it make 1000 lumens and also its advertised candela of 3000? And steps our custom-made TK lamp sphere, which is just the ticket for finding out for sure. We can even power this touchscreen monitor with a power tool battery. That's pretty trick. Since we have some doubts some of these tiny things will hit their claims by 30 seconds, we're going to dyno run each head-to-head, which also sounds kind of fun. The Streamlight's 300 is actually closer to 400, and that 1000 is clear into 1200 territory, though that's right out of the gate. A lot of models fall off after quite a bit. The Wedge here, not so much, holding rather steady, 1271 lumen as it gets to that ANSI FL1 30-second standard. Nice. In candela or lux from 1 meter here, same thing, we see just over 3000, yeah, 3230, 3180 or so. Off to a good start, 120% of advertised lumens, and the candela is up from 3000 to 3180. You can see why this light started a trend. These are some tall stats to beat. Up next, and trying to do it all for, well, $10 less, is the Coast Slayer. This is a 1150 lumen light that follows a very similar knuckle cutout sort of shape, but more squared off to fit 2 bulbs up front that together total 1150 lumens. One button cycles through different modes and the other turns on your favorite preset and turns off the light. The model does come with a USB-C port cover and charges at 0.85 amps, fairly good for this size of thing. Feels rather similar to the Streamlight and looks at 2, maybe a bit more spot focused in the center from one of those 2 LEDs being a thrower. So let's check that out, and it's 1150 lumens. Mid to high, and this is 450 to 500 lumen, and high is 1400 out the gate. Nice. You can program the dual turbo mode as your 1-button preset, so I suppose this is surprisingly tactical friendly, I guess. But over some time, it does lessen, unlike the Wedge, to meet the Wedge here, hitting 1217 by the FL1 standard mark, still above its 1150 claim. That's good stuff. And also due to its center hot focusing bulb, candela is looking pretty strong here as well. 4800, a noticeable upgrade in that regard over the Wedge. Comparable lumen output though at the finish line, and that's 106% of advertised. Looking pretty good so far. Our next purchase was the most requested after the Wedge, the 1000 lumen $80 Olight Arkfeld. I don't often feel Olight's products are particularly mechanic focused. Not that you need to be working on a car to use these, but this one checks a lot of boxes. Probably because it's following in some of those Wedge footsteps, but it also has a UV blacklight function as an option over a laser pointer, which is 365 nanometers in wavelength, and it's going to work for UV dye detection. That's pretty nice. Has a nice rocker switch to change between them, though I wish they could have eliminated the on button altogether like the Wedge does. And this is also more natural light color, this model, 4500K or so, which is great for identifying wires more easily. Of course, its charger is still that magnetic type, 0.85 amps is what we got, not bad. And that attachment adds some convenience, but isn't as metal chips friendly, sort of like the Wedge would be as well. Let's see how it does. The Arkfeld hits its 1000 mark early, and it keeps it solid, not going up, not going down, carrying it all the way to the finish with 1067 lumens. Its standard on mode is even 320 to match the Wedge's specs, though the Wedge did overshoot theirs up to 400. And this version, according to the brand, claims 1808 candela, and we see 2200 candela. Not bad considering its claims. And at least here, candela, for how we use these things, I mean, it's not going to hurt my feelings either. 107%, similar to the Coast in that stat. Things are looking pretty clean so far. Trying to see if we can step down in price at all, we have the Monstrum, which is an Amazon brand I've never heard of before, but was recommended when we searched Wedge flashlight. This is the Tracer, and it costs $60. We'd like to include some of different price point options to see if we're paying for name and packaging or performance on these things. While aluminum, it feels much lighter, like instead of a machined block of aluminum with electronics in it, a extruded aluminum tube with caps on the end. But for a front pocket, lightweight can be nice. It also advertises 1000 lumen, charges at a relatively slow half amp, and turning it on requires holding the power button down. The Wedge is more intuitive, quick draw sort of inspection tool in the UI, but that's good for not accidentally turning on in your pocket, I guess. Let's see that 1000 lumens. And yeah, it's just 630. It's supposed to step down into 600 from 1000 after 5 minutes, but we never found a 1000 lumen mode. This is as high as it goes in any long press, double tap, whatever setting. 611 lumens at the finish line, a lot for a penlight really, but not in the same league as these others. It doesn't advertise candela, but that's also, yeah, the lowest yet, 1800. So far, for about 75% of the price, it's also getting 61% of the performance. Okay, and last up, Nitecore at the same around $90 price point as the Wedge. This is bringing a lot more on paper. Wider, but pretty flat for your pocket. 3000 lumens instead of 1 or 1150 like the others. And yeah, it's blazingly bright in person, especially coming out of something this size. It also has a 1000 lumen mode, has this digital display on the side that tells you output, and even has a clock. And it charges at a comparably massive and quick 1.75 amps. We've seen lights with 5 times the battery size not charge near 2 amps. That provides a lot of convenience not having that much downtime. It has lockout settings, and those you might actually need to use too. The tail buttons are easy to bump in your pocket. It does have a proximity sensor so as to not heat up and burn something while it's left against something in high mode. Our overall thoughts on the buttons are that it is intuitive, half presses for modes, full press for off and on, hold the flat switch for turbo, but those buttons don't always behave like you want them to. I like the raised tail button myself for quick point and shoot inspection stuff. The switch is maybe just a bit too vague to select half click versus full click a lot of that time, and strobe pops up frequently and rarely is that my aim. In the sphere, however, this thing just dominates. Sure, it says 3000, so it should, but it does to the tune of 4000. Of course, it drops out of this, so curious, we kick it back up into it, but it won't stay there. An honest ANSI FL1 rating is more like 1524 lumens at the end here, still quite good versus what it says it should be doing. And if you thought that was a trouncing, check out Candela over 5000, and that's just in high. This is its turbo-like mode, peaking at 13,400 candela. You can feel it start to heat up in your hand. It's a bit of a beast. Hard to rate this one here. Yeah, it got 13,000 candela, but over here it's 152% of its 1000 mode or just 51% of its 3000 mode because it fell out of that by 30 seconds. Great at how you wish, knowing that it's why we charted them on a graph. But falling out of high lumen is something lights of this size like to do a lot, and brands often say some wild, over-optimistic things about runtime, so we also graph light output over that runtime, and that looks like this. The Nitecore surprisingly staying above 1000 like no other light does here. That results unsurprisingly now in a very early battery drain retirement, with the Amazon Monstrum doing the same here after 1 hour now at a lower lumen level. The rest of the race is a 3-horse one, Coast, Olight, and Wedge, though the Coast running at the mid 100s while the others in the mid 300s. Eventually Olight and Coast fall off, and the Wedge takes Coast's place in the mid 100s all the way to 3 hours and 20 minutes. Impressive stuff. To us, this data can be separated into 3 groups. The Monstrum conked out early and wasn't all that much light when it was awake. The Nitecore also died off at a similar time, but man, somehow spending the entirety of that over 1000 lumens. We've had a hard time finding 18650 and even 21700 size lights that will do this. They say 3, 4, 5000 lumens, then step down to 600 when you're using them. Usually it's a heat problem, and the smaller the light, the more so. This appears to have a copper and aluminum heat fin dissipator, and I'd say it's working. Then we have the longer running models, the Wedge, taking this battle by the looks of it, second going to the Arkfeld because Coast could not really stay above 150 lumens. Compared to their advertised runtime, this 3 hours we saw 3 hours 20, 2.5 we got 2 hours 42 minutes, 2 hours 40 we measured 2 hours 23 here, pretty close. 1 hour, yeah, 1 hour, they're being honest on this one, and 1 hour 45 we're seeing an hour 34. Not bad. This is actually the most honest list of runtimes we've ever had in a lights episode. Good stuff. If you total lumen minutes, which is basically a tally of lumens measured at 10-minute intervals for total light output, you get these figures. The Wedge taking it, running the longest, followed by the Nitecore, which still totaled a lot of output, and then Olight. The Olight being maybe the most efficient overall when looking at its battery size. These two don't advertise capacity, but we measured it as 1600 and just 900 milliamp hours. The Coast was least efficient by the numbers. To charge these batteries, this advertised 3 hours took 3 hours 20. It actually can take up to 4, but is more than 97% charged by 3 hours. Waiting for that red light to change to green will only net you 2 to 3%. This 2 hours was 2 hours 42 minutes, then 1.5 hours, nice, 2 hours, and just 1 hour and 10 minutes. Rapid pace charging on this Nitecore. With a display to tell you that voltage level as well, pretty awesome. All right, let's do some drop testing, then hand out some awards here. These all advertise some significant water resistance, so they'll be intermittently dunked into water and then dunked into the pavement outside the shop bay door here at increasing heights until they succumb to gravity. The Streamlight Wedge took 4 and 6 foot drops, no problem. 10 foot second drop in the Wedge is wasted. This is within the category like maybe slightly above average. It's getting a 6 out of 10. The Coast when dropped provides a more solid thud, oddly, maybe because of its flat sides, but an impressive showing from the Coast here. Well, it did pop off its lens cover around when the Wedge died, but is still working. Then it popped out the whole bulb shroud thing here. And after 12 foot, the entire LEDs and wiring are poking out, but still working somehow. Not a clean bill of health up until that point, but enough for a 7 to 10 from us. The Olight's size and weight feels like it would excel here, less mass to carry around. It makes it to around where the Wedge does. Second drop at 10 foot, gets a matching 6 out of 10. Not fragile, but not a tank either. Now the Monstrum, it's a funny one. When it drops, it sounds like a hollow Christmas ornament hitting the ground and somehow not shattering each time. And every time you drop it from 6, 12, 14 feet, and yes, resorting to spiking this thing onto the ground, ultimately taking 5 spikes to kill it, not graduating into the Hall of Fame where we couldn't kill it, but just shy of that, 9 out of 10. Shocked by this thing, not enough to outweigh some of its other performance today, but still pretty cool when it comes to durability. And here's the Nitecore. After the first drop, we noticed that water was actually making it behind the display screen cover here, and you can see droplets inside now. The Nitecore did well, though, fairly solid, and it feels it. It's made from stainless steel instead of aluminum, and it's got some chunk to it because of that. A slight hiccup on its first 12-foot drop. Wasn't altogether happy about things after that, and 14 foot made it shut off. Still works intermittently, though won't go into turbo mode anymore. It made it higher than the Coast, maybe due to that stainless steel frame, but mixed with this and the water drops inside, it's getting a 7 as well. So this is how everything looks. Overall, for how we use lights around vehicles, because we prefer the slider switch in shape, we don't think the Streamlight Wedge was really decidedly beaten today. It's solid and it makes sense why it's so popular. However, if you remove personal preferences about tactile things, the Arkfeld seems like the most obvious direct competition and successor. Something Streamlight can improve on all their lights is really charging time. It's always slow. And the Olight brings that. It brings the exact specs it says it does. It lasts a long time. When it comes to options that you can select, the light quality it casts is better than most of these today and much better than the Monstrum. And it works for leak detection, which saves you having to purchase another light in some cases. Either of these two can be used interchangeably and I think you'd be quite happy. After testing these, we learned about the new Arkfeld Pro, which brings some of the same things but extra in lumens and battery capacity. We bought the standard because that's what commenters requested. but that could just push this over the edge into being the go-to, so worth a look. And the Nitecore, oddly, even at 90 bucks, I think this one brings the highest value of the bunch. Stainless steel body, digital screen with output, voltage, time, copper heatsink design that actually works to stay at over 1000 lumens until it basically turns off if you wanted to. Real quick charge, 4000 lumens as measured. Those are features hard to cram into a small body, so this also gets our award for being the coolest. The sort of thing you'll want to own if you already own a light that meets some of your needs. Button design and accidentally button pressing unless you lock it every time push it out of that category of everyday use for us, but it dominates in the specs and performance department. It's insanely cool. I want another one. Appreciate you joining us for this one. We make episodes every Friday. Click subscribe to join us for those, and thanks for watching.